case of a woman who is known as the killer clown.
The clown was over my mother, looking out at us.
The evil clowns you see in the movies, well, it came to life in this case.
On a Saturday morning in 1990, a clown walked up to a front door in one of the wealthiest neighborhoods in Palm Beach County, Florida, carrying flowers and balloons.
Marlene opens the front door and is surprised to see a clown.
The woman who opened that door loved clowns, had collected them since childhood. Everyone who knew her knew that. The killer knew it too.
Your mom was growing up. Was she fascinated with clowns?
She was. She even painted pictures of them.
It was the one disguise guaranteed to make her open that door with a smile. Oh, how pretty, how nice.
My mother opened the door and I heard, how pretty.
Then the clown pulled out a revolver and shot her in the face, walked calmly back to a white car, and drove away. It would take 27 years to find out who was behind that painted smile. And when they did, the killer wasn't hiding. They were closer to the victim's family than anyone could have imagined. Wellington, Florida, 1990. The Aero Club. This isn't your typical suburb. This is a private aeronautical community where the homes have taxiways instead of sidewalks and private hangars built into the garages. Every house backs up to a runway. You had to know where you were going just to find the place. State Attorney Dave Ehrenberg would later describe it as an out-of-the-way community. You had to have a purpose. Wellington itself was the most populous village in Florida, known for its polo grounds, equestrian culture, and quiet wealth. Celebrity residents of the broader area reportedly included Vanilla Ice, Bill Gates, and Madonna. It was the kind of place where the most exciting thing that happened on a Saturday morning was someone riding their horse to brunch. That's where the Warrens lived. Their home on Takeoff Place, that's the actual street name, was a ranch-style property sitting on about an acre. Circular driveway, two-car garage, a single-engine airplane in the hangar, a jacuzzi, racehorses. The kind of life that looks from the outside exactly the way you'd want it to look. And it was funded almost entirely by one person, Marlene Warren. Marlene Mae McKinnon, a Midwestern girl from Mount Clemens, Michigan, just outside Detroit. She grew up on her grandfather's farm, got married young, had two sons, Johnny and Joe, by the time she was 18. That first marriage ended early, and then around 1970, she met an 18-year-old kid named Michael Kenneth Warren. They fell hard for each other, married in 1972, and Michael stepped in as a father to both boys. Joe Ahrens would later say Michael was the only father I knew. The family moved from Michigan to South Florida and built what looked like an empire. The centerpiece was a Bargain Motors, a used car dealership and rental car business on North Dixie Highway in West Palm Beach. The business was in Marlene's name. So were 17 to 20 rental properties, apartment complexes in the Westgate section worth an estimated $1 million. She collected rent herself, handled evictions, and worked on the side as a cargo ship inspector. Marlene Warren was not a woman sitting around the house. Her son described her simply, a good mother, an angel, we were best friends. Her prosecutor put it another way, someone without any known enemies. And there was one more thing about Marlene that everyone who knew her would mention. She loved clowns. Loved them since childhood. Her parents had decorated her bedroom with a clown theme when she was little, and she carried that love into adulthood. Clown figurines were everywhere. Her office, her car, her home. Her coworkers knew, her family knew. Everybody in the office knew Marlene loved clowns. John Warren Jr., a family business employee, later confirmed. Remember that detail. Now, Michael Warren ran the day-to-day at Bargain Motors, and the picture from the inside was very different from the outside. Employees would later describe systematic fraud, odometer rollbacks, title washing, insurance scams, stolen vehicle trafficking. One employee, John Warren Sr., was personally involved in turning back odometers and chopping up stolen cars, dumping the parts into Palm Beach County canals. Bargain Motors was not a car dealership. It was a criminal enterprise wearing a car dealership's clothes. And by the late 1980s, the Warren marriage was falling apart. In 1988, Marlene's older son Johnny was killed in a car accident at around age 22. It devastated Marlene, but Michael pulled the opposite direction. My mom was trying to pull it all together, Joe recalled, but Mike, instead of getting closer, got further apart. His business absorbed him. What absorbed him more specifically was a woman named Sheila Keen. Sheila Marie Sheltra grew up in LaBelle, Florida, on a large family farm. Strong-willed, independent, a horse lover who pushed boundaries. By her 20s, she had a shoplifting arrest and a felony theft charge on her record. In 1987, she married Richard Spud Keen, a man 18 years older than her. 3 months after the wedding, their son Charles was born. Both Sheila and Richard ended up working for Michael Warren at Bargain Motors. Sheila was a repo woman, chasing down unpaid vehicles, physical work. Coworkers described her as tough, dressing in a manly fashion, often wearing combat boots with a masculine walk, but also very nice, very bubbly.
Della Ward worked at Bargain Motors with Mike Warren.
I found her very nice, very bubbly.
The Sun Sentinel described her as pretty, tall, long, shiny brown hair. She was also really tough. The relationship between Sheila and Michael Warren escalated from professional to physical sometime in the late 80s, and there was nothing subtle about it. Coworker Don Carter told investigators it was no secret that he was a player. They'd leave the doors right open. There was no hiding it. Long lunches together, the whole car lot knew. Joe Arons saw it too. At a party at the Warren house, he watched Sheila flirting openly with Michael while Marlene was right there. I knew something was going on, but they didn't want to argue in front of me. Marlene knew. She told her family. She was scared, but she didn't leave. In January 1990, 4 months before the murder, Sheila filed a domestic violence petition against her husband Richard and moved into her own apartment on Sable Pine Circle. The rent was allegedly paid by Michael Warren. Neighbors at the apartment assumed Michael and Sheila were husband and wife. He was there at all hours of the day. Prosecutor Alethea McRoberts later described how Sheila's behavior was escalating in terms of possessiveness toward Michael, but the car lot employees had a more cynical read. They thought Michael was just in it for the sex. On April 10, 1989, more than a full year before Marlene was killed, attorney Christopher DeSantis was walking out of a Palm Beach County courtroom with Michael Warren. DeSantis had been representing Joe Arons in a legal matter, so he knew the family. And Michael Warren, casually, like he was speaking about the weather, posed a question. What would the ramifications be if a husband killed his wife on her estate? DeSantis' first thought, is this guy nuts? Why would you ask that with your wife right here? Then he looked around. Marlene wasn't there. So DeSantis answered. He explained that Florida law was peculiar. The key wasn't whether a man kills his wife. It was whether he's convicted of it. Because conviction for murder blocks inheritance, but a lesser charge wouldn't. And critically, if he had a friend who did it, and they couldn't tie him as an accessory to the friend, he'd get away scot-free. DeSantis later described Michael Warren as having two personalities, either cold and silent and very reserved, or the most affable guy in the world. His conclusion? His personality perfectly described a psychopathic deviant. And here's a detail that didn't surface until 2017. Around the time of the arrest, DeSantis recalled telling Michael something else during that conversation. That a killer dressed as a clown would likely get off because witnesses wouldn't be able to tell whether the shooter was a man or a woman. By 1990, Marlene Warren was afraid, and she told the people closest to her exactly what she feared. To her son Joe, she said, "If anything happens to me, your father did it." To her mother, Shirley Twing, she said, "If anything happens to me, Mike done it." Relatives told the Palm Beach Post that Marlene wanted to leave Michael but feared the consequences. And the financial picture made that fear make sense. The businesses, the rental properties, almost everything was in Marlene's name. Michael Warren profited, Prosecutor McRoberts laid out plainly. Largely, the properties and assets that they owned together were in her name, so by her predeceasing him, he was able to obtain 100% of the assets. Michael couldn't afford a divorce. A divorce would cost him everything. But Marlene's death? That was a different equation entirely. On April 15, 1990, 41 days before the murder, a white 1990 Chrysler LeBaron was reported stolen from a Payless rent-a-car. Here's how it happened. An out-of-town couple, the Restivos, had rented the car from Payless. When they went to return it, they looked up the name in the Yellow Pages, and what they found was Michael Warren's Bargain Motors ad, which prominently featured the words "Pay Less" in big letters. This wasn't an accident. It was a deliberate marketing scheme designed to confuse Payless customers into calling Bargain Motors instead. Payless had actually sued Michael Warren over this exact tactic. The Restivos called what they thought was Payless. Someone on the other end told them to leave the car outside the gate at the Payless lot, keys in the sun visor. The car was stolen that night. Bargain Motors employee Claude Poiters went to police with what he saw. Shortly after that phone call, he drove Michael Warren and Sheila Keen to the Payless lot. He watched them get into the white Chrysler LeBaron and drive it away. Michael told him, "Don't say anything to anyone about the LeBaron." That white LeBaron would show up again, 41 days later, in a circular driveway on Takeoff Place. John Warren Jr. later told detectives that from July through December 1989, the 6 months before the murder, Michael Warren had a habit. After phone arguments with Marlene, he'd say, Not once, not twice. Warren described it as a once-a-week thing. Memorial Day weekend. Saturday, May 26, 1990. Michael Warren leaves the house around 10 a.m., headed to Calder Racetrack in Miami Gardens with friends. Marlene is making pancakes for her son Joe, who's 21 and recovering from a broken leg, wearing a cast. 3 of Joe's friends are there: Jeannie Pratt, Wendell Pratt, and Mindy Perez. They're finishing breakfast in the family room. 2 days earlier, May 24th, a woman had walked into the Spotlight Capezio costume shop on South Dixie Highway in West Palm Beach right at closing time and insisted on being let in. "I need to buy a costume," she said. When told the shop was closing, "No, I really need this tonight." She paid cash for an orange wig, a yellow and hot pink clown jumpsuit, a makeup kit, specifically requesting enough white makeup to cover the entire face, a red clown nose, and white gloves. She did not buy clown shoes. The shop employees described her 5'8" to 5'10", long, thick, straight, chocolate-colored hair, big brown eyes, skinny with man-like features.
I could see that it was a woman, long chocolate brown hair, big brown eyes.
That same morning, the morning of the murder, a woman walked into a public supermarket at roughly 2948 North Military Trail, about 1 mile from Sheila Keen's apartment. She bought a white basket flower arrangement with red and white carnations, $15.87, and 2 foil balloons. One was a silver heart-shaped Mylar balloon reading, "You're the greatest." That specific balloon was sold at only that one Publix location in the entire area. The other balloon featured a scene from Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. She paid $100 cash for $15.87 worth of flowers. The Publix employees described her as a white female with long brown hair tied in a ponytail with male mannerisms. They initially thought she was a boy or man. Around 10:45 to 10:51 that morning, a white 1990 Chrysler LeBaron, no visible plates, rolled into the Warrens' circular driveway and stopped. The driver's door opened. A figure in full clown costume stepped out. Orange afro wig, red bulb nose, big orange smile painted on thick white makeup. So thick and even it looked, as Joe would describe it, like a mask because it was so smooth. White gloves, and notably, not clown shoes, black shoes, army-style combat boots. The clown carried the flower basket and the 2 balloons up to the front door. Other witnesses would later give varying descriptions. One described a gray jumpsuit like a mechanic's uniform with a Bozo the Clown wig. Another recalled a white clown suit with red hearts or diamonds. A third said the costume had blue dots. 2 witnesses said the wig was red. Joe consistently said orange. These discrepancies, 4 witnesses, 4 different descriptions of the same costume, would become one of the defense's strongest weapons decades later. Joe saw the clown approaching, and assumed it was a get-well surprise for his broken leg. We kind of figured I had a cast on, somebody was sending something to heal. Marlene insisted on answering the door herself. She opened it, she saw the flowers, she saw the balloons, she saw the clown. Oh, how pretty, how nice. She reached for the gifts. The clown produced a .38 caliber revolver and shot Marlene Warren in the face. The bullet entered her upper lip, fractured her teeth, punctured her tongue, and tracked into her neck, lodging in the C2 vertebrae of her spinal cord. She collapsed in the doorway, gasping for air. Jeannie Pratt rushed to her side, rolled her over, and saw a big hole in her upper lip. And then came the part that haunted every single person who watched it happen. The clown didn't run, didn't panic, didn't hurry. The figure turned around and walked back to the white Chrysler LeBaron at a calm, measured pace. Like no care in the world, Jeannie said. It was like, poof, just disappeared. Joe Aron's broken leg, cast and all, lurched after the clown, screaming. The clown turned and looked directly at him. Joe locked eyes with the figure and saw really dark eyes, brown eyes, above the painted white face. Then the clown got in the car and drove away. Didn't even squeal a tire. Just drove off like nothing happened. Joe scrambled into his mother's car and chased the LeBaron for 10 miles, running red lights all the way to Southern Boulevard. He never caught up. When he got back home, detectives and paramedics had already arrived. Neighbor Bill Kramer had been walking his Labrador Retriever when he heard the gunshot, which he said sounded like a nail gun. He saw the young people running from the house screaming, "They've shot Joey's mother!" Kramer and a neighbor who happened to be a physician rushed to the Warren home to administer first aid while Kramer's wife called 911. Marlene was rushed to Palms West Hospital in critical condition and placed on life support. She never regained consciousness. Joe sat at her bedside for hours, holding her hand, telling her, "I love you, please don't leave." There was no response. 2 days later, Memorial Day, May 28, 1990, at approximately 9:30 p.m., with no hope of recovery, life support was removed. Marlene Warren died at age 40. Her mother Shirley and her son Joe were at her side. An autopsy performed the next day confirmed the projectile was a .38 or .357 caliber round. Cause of death, gunshot wound to the head. And here's where the case takes a turn that should have led to an arrest within weeks. At 1:18 p.m. on the day of the shooting, barely 2.5 hours after the murder, detectives received an anonymous phone call from a woman who said Marlene Warren was just shot. And then she told them exactly who to question: Sheila Keen and Mike Warren. That anonymous caller was never identified, but she was right. By 3:18 p.m., detectives had already interviewed Michael. By 7:30 p.m., the costume shop owner had called police. The next morning, Sheila's estranged husband Richard walked into the station and dropped the most damning piece of testimony yet. Sheila had asked him, about a month before the murder, whether he'd seen a .38 revolver she had misplaced, same caliber used to kill Marlene. 4 days after the murder, the white LeBaron was found abandoned in a Winn-Dixie parking lot 8 miles from the crime scene. Inside, orange curly synthetic fibers consistent with a clown wig, a long brown strand of human hair, burgundy carpet fibers, a Publix paper bag in the trunk. That same day, investigators searched Sheila Keen's apartment. They didn't find the gun or the costume, but they found orange fibers on clothing in her closet that resembled clown wig fibers, and 2 pairs of black lace-up boots consistent with what witnesses described. From the soles of those boots, forensic analysts pulled orange and yellow acrylic fibers and burgundy fibers microscopically matched to fibers found in the LeBaron. And there was more. The clown disguise wasn't a random choice. John Warren Jr. confirmed the clown is an inside thing. Everybody in the office knew Marlene loved clowns. They were in her office, they were in her car, they were in her house. The killer chose a disguise specifically designed to guarantee Marlene would open the door with a smile on her face. It was weaponized intimacy. And one more thing. James Ahrens confirmed that Sheila Keen attended Marlene Warren's funeral. She stood there at the service for the woman she would eventually plead guilty to killing and paid her respects. Marlene was buried at Lake Worth Memory Gardens. Sheila showed up, but the disguise served another purpose, one that may have been legally strategic. That thick white makeup, the baggy costume, the wig, every eyewitness described the clown as approximately 6'1" and male. Sheila Keen was 5'5" to 5'6". The clown costume didn't just hide a face. It hid a gender. It hid a height. It hid everything. Prosecutor McRoberts acknowledged the problem. A clown is a clown. And that was the wall the case hit. Despite everything, the affair, the stolen car, the costume shop description, the fibers, the boots, the financial motive, the anonymous tip, Marlene's own warning to her son. Prosecutors in the 1990s declined to bring charges. DNA technology was in its infancy. The brown hair found in the LeBaron was consistent with Sheila's, but microscopic hair comparison couldn't produce a definitive match. The costume shop identification was tentative. The employee picked Sheila and one other woman from a lineup as possibly the buyer. The murder weapon and clown costume were never recovered. The lead crime scene investigator would later die, breaking the chain of custody for critical evidence. PBSO spokesman Bob Farrell had said it the day after the murder. "This is the strangest thing I've seen in all my 19 years in law enforcement." He had no idea how strange it was about to get. Without charges, Sheila Keen walked free. And Michael Warren? The murder investigation had exposed the fraud at Bargain Motors. 5 months after Marlene's death, police raided the car lot and arrested Michael on 66 counts: racketeering, odometer tampering, grand theft, insurance fraud, dealing in stolen property. He was convicted on 43 counts in 1992 and sentenced to 9 years. His own attorneys argued prosecutors were punishing him for the murder they couldn't prove through the fraud charges they could. He served about 3.5 years in minimum security and was released on New Year's Eve 1997. Upon release, he reconnected with Sheila. She'd changed, cut and dyed her long brown hair blonde, started going by Debbie. And in June 1991, while all of this was unfolding, Michael quietly collected $53,359.37 as the beneficiary of Marlene Warren's life insurance policy. He'd promised Joe he'd receive half of Marlene's assets. Joe received nothing. Everything transferred solely into Michael's name. When Michael got out of prison, he spoke to Joe once and then vanished from his life. "Left me like a bag of trash," Joe said. That betrayal sent Joe into years of grief, PTSD, and substance abuse. On August 15, 2002, 12 years after Marlene's murder, Michael Warren married Sheila Keen at the Little White Chapel in Las Vegas. Sheila legally became Sheila Keen-Warren. She took the surname of the woman she was accused of killing. They moved to Abingdon, Virginia, a small town in the Blue Ridge Mountains, bought a lakefront home in the Heron Point community, later valued at $581,700. Across the Tennessee border, approximately 45 minutes southwest of Abingdon, they opened a drive-through burger restaurant called the Purple Cow on East Stone Drive in Kingsport. They ran it together for 13 years, working 6 days a week, Sundays off. Burgers, milkshakes, home-style cooking. They built a loyal local following.
So as you can see, I'm standing here in front of Purple Cow here in Kingsport, Tennessee. We've been here so many times. We come here for milkshakes, cheeseburgers, everything. And for it to happen, and it's just crazy.
Sheila went by Debbie Warren. For 17 years, nobody in their new community knew her real name or her history. Their Virginia neighbors described them as a hardworking, generous, sociable couple. They hosted birthday parties, rode golf carts around the community, maintained an active social life. One neighbor, Brooke Blevins, said after the arrest, "She would be the last person on earth I would ever suspect. She's just so loving." They sold the Purple Cow on December 31st, 2016, 9 months before the arrest. 9 months before everything collapsed. And then, a detail that defies belief. Former Purple Cow employees told detectives that there had been rumors at the restaurant that Sheila had shot Michael's former wife while dressed as a clown. But the real kicker? Someone provided investigators a photograph of Sheila in full clown makeup, taken at the restaurant during a Halloween celebration. She had voluntarily dressed as a clown at her own workplace years after being suspected of committing murder in that exact disguise. One former employee reportedly told investigators that Sheila got drunk one night and confessed to buying a clown costume and murdering Marlene because she was keeping her husband away from the affair. Meanwhile, the science was catching up. In 2013, prosecutor Reed Scott began revisiting the forensic evidence. In 2014, the Palm Beach County Cold Case Unit formally reopened the case. The hair samples and blood vials taken from Sheila in 1990, preserved in evidence storage for over 2 decades, were sent to the FBI crime lab for mitochondrial DNA analysis, a type of testing that simply didn't exist when Marlene was killed. In 2016, the results came back. A strand of burgundy head hair with the root attached, found in the Chrysler LeBaron, was tested. The FBI concluded the skin portion of the hair root belonged to Sheila Keen-Warren. She could not be excluded as the DNA source.
Hair fibers and a Publix receipt. Just some of the evidence Palm Beach County detectives collected over 27 years in a Wellington killer clown cold case murder.
The investigators also found something the original detective missed: a 6 to 8 inch fiber on a ribbon attached to one of the balloons from the crime scene, microscopically identical to the orange wig fibers from the car and Sheila's shoes. On September 26, 2017, Sheila and Michael were driving home near their Heron Point property in their Cadillac Escalade after visiting Sheila's mother in Vermont. Deputies and U.S. Marshals pulled them over. Sheila was arrested without incident. Michael had no warrant. He drove home. In the patrol car, Sheila asked, "Where are we going?" Then, "Am I under arrest and what for?" And then, the question that prosecutors would point as proof she knew exactly what this was about: "Is my husband under arrest?" When she was told she was the accused shooter in the killer clown case from 27 years earlier, Sheila Keen-Warren put her head down on a desk and didn't say another word. The state announced its intention to seek the death penalty. Sheila waived her right to a speedy trial in November 2017, a decision that, combined with everything that followed, would keep her in jail for over 5 years before any resolution. The death penalty was eventually dropped in February 2020. A bond hearing in March 2021 was denied. Sheila remained in custody, waiting. When reporters called 87-year-old Shirley Twing, Marlene's mother, to tell her the suspect had been arrested and was now married to Michael Warren, Shirley's response was, "He married the killer? Son of a gun." There's another layer to this that most coverage skips. After Sheila's arrest, John Warren Jr. came forward with his father's deathbed confession. John Warren Sr., the same employee who'd helped chop cars and dump parts in canals, had died in 1996. On his deathbed, he told his son that he had driven a second getaway car on the morning of the murder, and that car would get me anything I ever wanted from Mike Warren. Warren Jr. was blunt. "I knew everything. My father was directly involved, 100%. He claimed to know where the murder weapon and clown costume were disposed of. Cold case detectives actually dove into a Palm Beach County canal on his tip, one diver going down more than 10 feet while another served as alligator watch. They pulled up a 1982 Audi 4000S along with tube socks, blue and red scraps of cloth, and a shoe sole. But the Audi had been reported stolen in 1987, 3 years before the murder. No costume, no gun. When shown photos of the recovered car, Warren Jr. said it was the wrong car and urged detectives to dive again. Warren Jr. also alleged that after Sheila's arrest, Michael Warren contacted him through a burner phone and offered to buy him a house if he'd testify favorably. Police obtained search warrants and found the burner had logged over 200 minutes of calls to Warren Jr., and it also made numerous calls to Sheila's defense attorney, Richard Lubin. The warrant listed charges under investigation as homicide and tampering with a witness. And here's a detail about Sheila's finances while she sat in jail claiming she couldn't afford an attorney. In 2019, she applied for indigent status, claiming take-home income of only $100 a week and no assets. Michael had already paid $90,000 of a $150,000 legal bill, but prosecutors dug in and discovered she had concealed over $1 million in assets: the Abington Lakefront home, a second property in Kingsport, 2 Florida properties, a Cadillac Escalade, a Dodge Challenger SRT Hellcat, and bank accounts totaling over $300,000. Days after the accounts were flagged, all 3 were transferred into accounts held solely by Michael Warren. The prosecutor called it nothing short of perpetrating a fraud onto the court in the state of Florida. Her indigent status was revoked. What followed was 5.5 years of legal limbo. The trial was postponed at least 7 times. COVID, discovery disputes, the death of the lead crime scene investigator, and a last-minute bombshell, a 25-page clown sighting file that had been misplaced for decades inside a box of documents from Michael's fraud case, rediscovered in October 2022, just days before the trial was set to begin. The defense fought hard on multiple fronts. The DNA match was challenged. Mitochondrial DNA could only narrow the source to approximately 1 in 25 Caucasian women. Even Marlene Warren herself couldn't be excluded from the hair sample. Defense attorney Greg Rosenfield argued the hair could have been innocently deposited in the LeBaron when the car was at Bargain Motors, where Sheila worked, repossessing vehicles. The eyewitness descriptions were weaponized for the defense. Every initial witness had described the clown as a 6'1" male. Rosenfield argued everything was so methodical. This person walking up to the house, committing this shooting, and then slowly walking away. We're dealing with someone who had experience in committing a hit or a murder. That is not Sheila. And the evidence itself was falling apart. Literally. A 1999 audit had found evidence bags ripped open and mixed with other cases. During a pretrial hearing, a forensics expert's evidence bag tore open right there in court, and the balloon string from the crime scene fell out onto the floor. That moment visibly undermined the chain of custody in front of everyone in the courtroom. Then there was the Edward Barr angle, a Maine inmate who allegedly bragged to a cellmate that he'd killed a woman in Wellington dressed as a clown, claimed he was hired by the husband at the Mermaid Bar, and offered to tell police everything if they'd promise he wouldn't get the electric chair. When no promise was made, Barr asked for a lawyer. In a 2022 deposition, he denied the confession, claiming he saw the case on television. Prosecutors pointed out there was no TV in solitary. And through it all, Sheila sat in Palm Beach County Jail, much of it in solitary confinement. She was baptized Catholic in 2018. She wrote nearly 200 pages of jailhouse letters. To Michael, "There is no words to describe how much I love and miss you. I feel so empty inside and my whole body aches for you." She proclaimed her innocence throughout. "God knows I wouldn't hurt anything or anyone. That's not me." On April 25, 2023, less than 3 weeks before the scheduled trial, Sheila Keen-Warren appeared before a judge during his lunch break from another murder trial. No public notice was given. And after 33 years, she pleaded guilty to second-degree murder, reduced from first degree. The sentence? 12 years, with a credit for 2,039 days already served. Under Florida's 1990 sentencing law, which applied because the crime happened in 1990, she could earn generous gain time credits. Her attorney calculated she could be home in as few as 10 months. And then the contradiction. Her defense team immediately maintained she was innocent. Attorney Greg Rosenfield called the plea an incredible win and said it was an incredibly hard decision for our client, saying you did something that you didn't do. Nothing's harder than that. He laid out the math. The state of Florida originally wanted to execute her, but now she's going home. State Attorney Aaron Berg was blunt about why the prosecution accepted the deal. Critical evidence rulings hadn't gone their way. The judge hadn't yet ruled on whether the DNA and fiber evidence would even be admissible. If it was excluded, the case collapsed. Key witnesses had died. Memories had faded over 3 decades. The worst thing that could happen, Aaron Berg said, would be that Sheila Keen-Warren would be found not guilty, not because she was innocent, but because after 33 years, we could not prove beyond a reasonable doubt that she was the one who did it. Joe Ahrens appeared via Zoom. He approved the terms. His statement was brief, and it carried 33 years of weight. "The only thing I want to say is that through this trial, I didn't see any remorse. God be with her. Marlene's mother, Shirley Twing, had died in March 2023, 1 month before the plea. She never saw any measure of accountability. On November 2nd, 2024, Sheila Keen-Warren, age 61, walked out of Gadsden Correctional Facility in Quincy, Florida, roughly 7 total years in custody for a premeditated murder. Her attorney released a statement. "We are absolutely thrilled that Ms. Keen-Warren has been released from prison and is returning to her family. As we've stated from the beginning, she did not commit this crime." Ehrenberg countered, "Sheila Keen-Warren will always be an admitted convicted murderer and will wear that stain for every day for the rest of her life." Reports indicate Sheila returned to Michael Warren in the Kingsport, Tennessee area. Michael had repurchased the Purple Cow restaurant. They are believed to be together, running a burger joint, keeping a low profile. And Michael Warren has never been charged with any crime related to Marlene's murder. The man whose attorney told him a friend could kill his wife without legal consequence, whose employee watched him steal the getaway car, whose other employee heard him threaten to kill Marlene every week for 6 months, whose own lawyer called him a psychopathic deviant, who married the prime suspect, moved across the country, and built a new life. Ehrenberg's words sit there, doing all the work they need to do. We do have our suspicions, though. There is one question this case keeps circling back to, and it doesn't have a clean answer. Sheila Keen-Warren pleaded guilty, but her attorneys say she's innocent. She served 7 years for what was, by every piece of evidence available, a planned, deliberate, cold-blooded execution. Michael Warren has never been charged, never been tried, and is currently running a restaurant with the woman convicted of killing his first wife. So here's the question. Was this justice? 7 years for a murder where the killer weaponized the victim's love of clowns, walked calmly away from the body, and then married the victim's husband and took the victim's name? Or was the plea deal the only realistic option? The least bad outcome after 33 years of eroded evidence, dead witnesses, and a system that ran out of time? Joe Aarons has spent more than half his life haunted by the image of a clown walking calmly away from his mother's body. He lost his mother, his brother, his relationship with the only father he ever knew, and years to addiction and grief. He accepted a deal he found inadequate because the alternative, watching the woman he believes killed his mother walk free on a not guilty verdict, was worse. Joe now lives in Jensen Beach, Florida. In January 2025, he launched a YouTube channel to share his story and discuss healing from trauma. He helps others struggling with substance abuse, a battle he knows intimately from his own decades-long journey. He was 3 when Michael Warren became his father. He was 21 when a clown killed his mother. He was 54 when the woman who did it walked free. She pleaded guilty but says she's innocent. He never got charged at all. What do you think about this case? Let us know your thoughts in the comments.